Hello, I'm John David Ebert, and welcome to the fourth class of the fourth week of our course in Understanding Contemporary Art. Right now we're in the middle of a discussion of the works of Gerhard Richter. Next, after this, we'll be looking at Anselm Kiefer. But last time we left off with looking at the second plane of signification in Richter's work, the plane of abstract energies. And we saw there that something was beginning to happen. The energies were beginning to gather and move in the direction as though they were beginning to form a kind of cosmology of one sort or another. And indeed, if we move ahead here to 1980, Richter makes a very interesting painting here. This is called Stroke on Red, a very long horizontal canvas with a yellow stroke on red with little blue dots. What this is basically is a mark with a capital M in the Derridian sense. It's a mark of iterability. It's something that can be reiterated over and over again, but it's also a mark that functions as a kind of, that's analogous to a kind of cosmic demarcating line. In the ancient mythologies, this would be equivalent to the drawing of a horizon line that separates the heavens above from the earth below, in which the world parents, which was normally depicted as the sky father and the earth mother. In Egypt, of course, it was the other way around, the sky mother and the earth father. But whichever gender you assign to them, the idea was that the heavens and the earth separated in the mythical structure of consciousness in order to begin to produce, through their various sexually generative acts, cosmic energies and cosmic formative processes. And it is almost as though Richter, in drawing this mark, this iterable mark, we're beginning to move into the formation of a cosmology. And indeed, when we look at his abstract paintings from this time, this is Hedge from 1982, we can begin to see that it looks as though these processes were indeed beginning to separate out and coagulate into the formation of a cosmos. Here we can see that the sort of Gertan colors of blue and yellow are beginning to separate out. Red is beginning to separate out from the greens. Everything is beginning to separate out as though it were gathering for something that's beginning to form. This is Clouds of 1982, and here we can see once again that the blue and the green, or rather the red and the blue, are beginning to separate out. And in this painting here, Abstract Picture 1984, the previous one had been the 1982 clouds. That gave us a sense of the heavens lifting off from the earth. And here we have a more stonic image. This is an abstract picture, but it's clearly an earthly image where the lower half, the earthly elements, are now beginning to separate out from the heavenly elements. So clearly something is beginning to form in the sense of a traditional cosmology, the heavens splitting off from the earth. And it's as though Richter were on the way to creating a whole new, brand new set of signifieds and to create a new cosmos. But in the mid-80s, he begins to arrest this process in mid-formation with the discovery of a new method. This is an abstract painting from that time, from 1986, which has resulted from him taking a long squeegee and simply drawing it from left to right, or in some cases from top to bottom, across the canvas to erase the image. So note that the squeegee is actually a literal eraser that he's using here. And we can see in this clip here at this point from the documentary film called Gerhard Richter Painting, we can see him doing this process of drawing the squeegee from left to right slowly across the canvas, left to right, the same direction in the west that we read from, and also top to bottom. And the image is actually literally erased with a literal erasure, as though to make literally clear what he had been doing all along. He's erasing these images, he's effacing them. And not only that, but the Fermat process that we saw in the photo paintings, where we saw him essentially crossing out the photographs by blurring them with the paintbrushes earlier on, is essentially the prototypical ancestor of this technique. But that technique had existed on the first plane of signification of the photo paintings, the plane of organization. But now note that that technique is beginning to transfer to the second plane of signification in his work, to the plane of abstraction. So he's moving the Fermat process over to the other plane of signification, which means that from henceforth the two planes now are beginning to blur together and to intersect. And indeed, the resultant effect of this, if we go back and look at some of the paintings that begin to result, this is from his 1988 series on the Baader Meinhof terrorist group. This one is called Arrest 1, and it's very blurry. The images are getting blurrier and blurrier, less and less clear now as these processes begin to interact with each other. It's as though the erasure process on the plane of intensivities of his abstract art were beginning to infect the way that images and entities unconceal themselves on the plane of organization, the plane of the formative figures, the actual figurative representations. On the other hand, here is Hanged, which is an image of Gudrun Ensslin, who reputedly hanged herself in her cell. This is also from the same year, 1988. And we can see how blurry the images are becoming now. They're scarcely recognizable. This is S with Child from 1995. Note that his canvases now, this is a photo painting, but note that the canvases are filling now with noise. The signals within them are becoming more and more degraded with entropy, visual entropy, and noise over time as his canvases evolve. This one is 16 November 1999, and we can see literally how the two planes are intersecting here. The plane of his abstractions that are done with the squeegee and the active erasure, and the figurative photo paintings here, they're literally beginning to entropically sort of combine with each other. And this is an example of one of his later abstract paintings. This one is from 1990, which has also been made with the squeegee. But note that it looks as though, it looks a little like the kind of residue that's left on the wall on city walls when posters are taken down. And so it's as though the transcendental signifieds that were functional within the context of being in the metaphysical age had been removed. And what Richter is painting in his abstract images are the scars of being. They're the scars and traces, and his art is an art of traces only, left behind by the absence of the transcendental signifieds and the signifiers that once pointed to them. There are no recognizable signifiers in his abstract paintings. Instead, what we have is an art of scars left behind by the absence of transcendental signifieds, which exist no longer. This is 8 Gray from 2002. In the later works, he actually becomes interested in precisely in the absence of images, as though to literalize Baudrillard's complaint that he often made in his writings, that the problem with contemporary art is that it is composed of an art, he said, in which there is precisely nothing to see. Baudrillard wasn't much of a fan of contemporary art, and here it's as though Richter were literalizing that. This is 11 Panes from 2004, which is simply 11 empty panes of glass set on an easel, set on a kind of stand, and indeed there is nothing to see except what is reflected, whatever happens to be reflected by chance at the time. So Richter is becoming more and more aniconic, more and more of an aniconic artist over time as noise builds up on the canvases. And the other thing to keep in mind about the noise that has built up on his canvases, here's the last image that I want to show. This is from Cologne Cathedral in 2007, where he filled in the stained glass window with digital pixels, digital pixelization, so that the original signifiers are completely absent and they have indeed been replaced by digitization, which makes the point precisely that in the electronic age, digitization now has replaced being. Being has been digitized. And indeed, I think if we think about the Heideggerian process of the way in which Heidegger said that entities unconceal themselves in the clearing, over time, if we note the buildup of noise in Richter's art, we can see that the entities in his artwork unconceal themselves less and less perfectly over time. They get noisier, and it's as though the entities in the clearing were having trouble unconcealing themselves. They're getting worse and worse, more and more degraded over time. In direct proportion to the technological increase, on the other hand, in our technological media, where the images have gotten better and better with higher and higher resolution. We've got HD this, HD that, Blu-ray DVDs, and higher and faster internet speeds. It's been a gradual increase in resolution in the digital clearing and the digitization of being, but in Richter's art he has tracked how truth and the truth process itself in the realm of philosophy and in the arts has been degraded and is becoming murkier and murkier in the age of soft ontologies that Gianni Vattimo talks about in his writings, and hermeneutics, which is a kind of truth game. Truth has to be situated. Truth is entirely context dependent in hermeneutics. And as Gadamer wrote in his book Truth and Method, the text in hermeneutics is something that the text in itself is something that we can never get at. It's fuzzy and grainy, and there's always today's prejudices infecting our interpretations of yesterday's text. So we can never get at the text in itself. And so we're constantly seeing this process of entities retreating and receding from our grasp. They're getting fuzzier and fuzzier in the post-metaphysical age, harder and harder to grasp, harder and harder to unconceal themselves with any kind of clarity and definition at all in the post-metaphysical age.